They thought she was just another poor child wiping windshields for coins. Until the words she whispered in the freezing Boston wind made a millionaire drop everything and change the course of both their lives forever. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe so you won't miss the journey all the way to Chapter 10. The late winter air in Boston was a blade against the skin, sharp and merciless. Daniel Hayes sat behind the wheel of his black Mercedes, the engine still purring softly after a long morning meeting near Copley Square. His life, from the outside, appeared untouchable. 45 years old. A real estate magnate with holdings across New England, living in penthouses and glass towers, most people only glimpsed in glossy magazines. Yet inside, he carried a silence heavier than any skyscraper he had ever built. Traffic slowed near a red light on Tremont Street, just blocks from Boston Common. Daniel adjusted his cufflinks, impatient, when suddenly a small figure appeared beside his car. She was so tiny that at first he thought she might be a shadow blown across the pavement. But then he saw her, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, clutching a ragged cloth. She reached up, barely tall enough to wipe his windshield. Her hands trembled. The fabric smeared more dirt than it removed, but Daniel couldn't look away. The girl's fingers were raw and nicked, small cuts glistening red against the gray daylight. She pressed her lips together as if silence was safer, yet when Daniel lowered the window just an inch, he heard her voice, barely a whisper. I just want to buy milk." The words shattered him. They cut through decades of polished negotiations, of champagne toasts, of boardroom applause. Milk. Not candy, not toys, just milk. Daniel's chest tightened. He remembered another winter, long ago in Dorchester, when he was the boy left shivering outside a locked apartment door after his father disappeared for good. He remembered standing in a line at a church basement, waiting for a carton of milk his mother could barely afford. He looked again at the girl. Her coat was several sizes too big, frayed at the sleeves. Blonde strands clung damp to her cheeks, where the wind had kissed them raw. She should have been in school, laughing with friends, not begging the cold city for a taste of nourishment. Daniel reached for his wallet. He had given money to countless causes, children's hospitals, housing projects, scholarships. But this was different. This was not charity on paper. This was a child inches away whispering the same hunger he once knew. He lowered the window further. "What's your name?" The girl blinked, startled that he had asked. "Lily," she whispered. Her voice cracked, as if saying it aloud cost her strength. "Lily," Daniel repeated, testing the sound. He handed her a $20 bill. "Go get your milk." She hesitated, eyes darting nervously as though someone might punish her for accepting. Then she took the bill carefully, as if it were glass, and tucked it into the pocket of her oversized coat. She gave a quick nod, then stepped back onto the icy curb. The light turned green. The chorus of horns behind him broke the moment, but Daniel didn't move. His hand remained frozen on the steering wheel. Something inside him, a voice he hadn't heard since childhood, rose with stubborn urgency. "Don't drive away." In the rearview mirror, he saw Lily shuffle toward the sidewalk, her small figure swallowed by the wind. He could have left. He should have left. Yet the image of those bleeding hands pressed against glass stayed with him. Daniel pulled into a side street and parked. His breath clouded as he stepped out, coat collar high against the wind. His Italian leather shoes crunched on dirty snow as he followed the faint outline of the girl. She walked quickly, head bowed, weaving through traffic with the quiet agility of someone used to going unnoticed. At a corner store, she pushed open the door with both hands, disappearing inside. Daniel stood across the street, unsure why he was there. He told himself it was simple curiosity. Yet when she emerged minutes later clutching a half-gallon of milk against her chest like treasure, he felt something shift. The bottle was almost bigger than she was. She adjusted her grip and began down the cracked sidewalk toward a cluster of old apartment blocks in Roxbury. The neighborhood was a world away from Daniel's penthouses. Graffiti scrawled on brick walls, broken blinds flapping in windows, trash bags piled like shadows. He followed at a distance until she vanished into one of the buildings. A rusted number above the doorway read 3B. Daniel stopped. He could turn back now. He could let the memory of Lily fade like countless faces he passed on the street each day. But he couldn't. His chest ached with the memory of another door that once closed on him, of another child abandoned to hunger and silence. The cycle had to break somewhere. As he stood there, the entryway door slammed shut behind Lily. The sound echoed like a verdict. Daniel clenched his fists against the cold. For the first time in years, business deals and boardroom votes felt meaningless. He wasn't Daniel Hayes, the millionaire developer. He was a boy again, and the city was daring him to choose, walk away as others had, or step into the fire of someone else's suffering. The choice, he knew, would change everything. The cab of Daniel's Mercedes felt colder than the streets outside. He sat motionless for minutes after Lily disappeared into the brick apartment block, the number 3B rusting above the entryway, like a scar the city refused to heal. Roxbury was no stranger to Daniel. In his earliest years, before fortune and foresight lifted him into glass towers, he had known neighborhoods like this, where broken mailboxes leaned crooked, where heating vents rattled through thin walls, where children learned to dodge the sharp edges of survival before they learned multiplication. But to see Lily vanish into that building, milk pressed against her chest, made the air itself feel heavy. He locked his car and crossed the street. The hallway smelled of damp plaster and cigarette smoke. A bare bulb flickered overhead, casting shadows across peeling paint. On the third floor he found 3B, the wood warped from years of weather, the lock loose but stubborn. From inside came the sound of a man's voice, low at first, then rising. Daniel knocked. The door cracked open, revealing Lily's face, startled, pale, still holding the milk. Behind her, the smell of alcohol floated out like a tide. A figure loomed into view. Carl Dawson. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt stained. He was in his 40s but carried the collapse of a man older, the kind who let bitterness carve trenches where dignity once stood. He squinted at Daniel as though calculating how much money his tailored coat might be worth. "And you are?" Carl slurred, his Boston accent thickened by whiskey. Daniel spoke evenly. "A friend. I saw Lily outside. I just wanted to be sure she was safe." Carl barked a laugh that ended in a cough. "Safe? In this palace?" He swung the door wider, gesturing to the dim one-bedroom where trash bags sat piled near the radiator. "Safer than the streets, pal. That's all that matters." Daniel's jaw tightened. He kept his tone steady. "She's too young to be out there in the cold, washing windows for coins? That isn't right." Carl's smile sharpened. "Not right? You think milk pays for itself? You think this roof is free?" He shoved the milk carton from Lily's hands onto the counter, sloshing liquid onto the floor. "She pulls her weight. That's how it goes." Lily flinched, eyes darting to Daniel as though hoping he might stay, might somehow anchor her against the storm. But Carl noticed the glance and his expression hardened. "You want to play hero, Mr. Fancy Car?" His voice rose, turning cruel. "Then pay for it. Rent's due, bills piling. You want her safe? You line my pocket. Otherwise—" His hand slammed against the doorframe. "Otherwise, you leave us the hell alone." Daniel could feel the heat rising in his chest, memories clawing up from the depths. He remembered standing in a hallway just like this one, his mother pleading with a landlord while his father's shadow receded forever. He remembered the helplessness of watching adults barter dignity while he, a child, became collateral. He forced himself to breathe. "What Lily needs isn't more bills for you to drink away," he said quietly. "She needs safety. She needs food, school, care, things you clearly—" The door slammed shut with a crack that shook the frame. Metal scraped as Carl threw the deadbolt. Daniel stood in silence, the echo still ringing. From the end of the hall came the creak of another door. An elderly woman stepped out, a wool shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was white, her posture bent, but her eyes, sharp Irish green, studied Daniel with the wisdom of someone who had seen too many nights like this. "Don't waste your breath," she said softly. Her accent carried County Cork roots softened by decades in Boston. "Carl Dawson won't change. That girl's been raising herself since she could walk." Daniel turned toward her. "You know them?" She nodded. "Name's Mrs. O'Connor. I live down the hall. I see more than I wish I did. Lily takes out the trash, brings him bottles, even sneaks to the bodega when the cupboards go bare. Sweetest child in the world. Smiles even when she's hungry." Her voice trembled, then steadied. "You care. I can see it. But men like him, he knows the system, knows how to twist it. If you really mean to help her, don't just hand out cash. It'll vanish into his throat before the night's done." Daniel clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms. "Then what? What do I do?" Mrs. O'Connor's eyes softened with something almost like pity. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you truly care, you come back. Before it's too late. That child's light won't survive long in that darkness." She turned back toward her apartment, her door clicking shut behind her. Daniel remained in the hall, staring at the locked door of 3B. He could almost hear Lily breathing on the other side, caught between obedience and despair. He wanted to break the lock, to carry her away immediately, to rewrite the script of her childhood in one bold stroke. But the law was a wall higher than any skyscraper he had ever built. Without proof, without cause, he would be branded the intruder, the predator. He knew the weight of rumor, how quickly whispers could crush reputations. Still, as he walked back toward the stairs, the echo of Mrs. O'Connor's warning followed him down each step. "Come back before it's too late." On the sidewalk, Daniel paused beneath the gray sky. Snow began to drift again, soft flakes dissolving on his coat. His phone buzzed with emails from investors in Manhattan, contracts waiting for his signature. None of it mattered. Not compared to the image of a little girl whose only crime was wanting milk. His car waited at the curb, sleek and silent. But for the first time, Daniel felt like it was the wrong vehicle. What he needed wasn't horsepower or leather interiors. What he needed was evidence, leverage, a way to rip away the mask Carl Dawson wore when the world was watching. Daniel Hayes was a man who built empires from foundations no one else believed in. And now, for reasons he could not fully explain, he knew he would build something greater: safety, justice, perhaps even family, for one small girl hidden behind a rotting door in Roxbury. He slid into the driver's seat, but this time he didn't start the engine. He sat in silence, fists still curled, eyes fixed on the building across the street. The decision had already been made. The city had gone quiet, but Daniel's mind had not. Boston at midnight was a strange companion, its historic brick streets echoing with the hush of wind, the occasional rattle of a train, the glow of neon signs that hummed against the cold. Daniel sat behind the wheel of his Mercedes again, parked across from the Roxbury apartment block. The world told him to go home, to retreat to his penthouse with its leather armchairs and panoramic views. But his conscience chained him here, in the shadow of broken fire escapes and graffiti-tagged walls. The hallway of 3B had been burned into his memory. The peeling paint, the smell of stale beer, the sound of Carl Dawson's hand slamming the door. Most of all, the look in Lily's eyes, an unspoken plea thin as glass that said, "Please don't forget me." So he didn't. Around 1 o'clock a.m., the heavy sound of a lock turned. Daniel watched from the street as the elderly neighbor, Mrs. O'Connor, stepped out, bundled in a shawl, her cane tapping gently against the floor. She noticed his car. At first she frowned, then crossed the street toward him, her face lit by the pale cone of a streetlight. "You came back," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. Daniel lowered his window. "I couldn't leave her." Mrs. O'Connor glanced toward the building. "Then you'll need more than pity. You'll need proof." From beneath her shawl, she drew a small USB stick, attached to a keychain worn smooth with years. "Building's got cameras. Cheap, but they work. I convinced the super to let me keep a copy of the hallway footage. No one else bothers, but I worry for the children here." She pressed it into Daniel's hand. "Watch it, and tell me if you still plan to help." Back in his office later that night, Daniel placed the USB into his laptop. The screen flickered, then revealed grainy black and white footage of the third-floor hallway. The date stamp blinked steady. Yesterday, 7:46 p.m. Lily appeared, dragging a trash bag almost as large as her body. She bent forward, tiny shoulders straining, feet slipping on the linoleum. She paused, clutching her chest, then continued toward the chute at the end of the hall. Minutes later, the door to 3B opened again. Carl stumbled out, a bottle in one hand, shouting at her to hurry. She flinched, but didn't answer. She lifted the bag, shoved it down the chute, then turned back to him with eyes lowered. Another clip, Carl handing her coins. She slipped into the hall, returned 10 minutes later with a 6-pack of beer. He snatched it from her hands, cracked one open, and when the can foamed over, he cursed and shoved it at her. Foam dripped onto the floor. Lily dropped to her knees, using her sleeve to wipe it clean. Daniel froze the frame. Her knees bent awkwardly against the floor tiles, her small hands rubbing desperately while Carl loomed overhead. The posture was too familiar. It was the posture of submission, of a child reduced to servitude. Something inside him snapped. He thought of his own father, the man who had walked away and never looked back. The man who had left Daniel's mother begging for rent money, working herself to exhaustion while Daniel carried the weight of being both son and provider before he was even 10. History was repeating itself, right here on his laptop, and he would not allow it. Daniel opened a new folder on his desktop. He labeled it Evidence, Case for Lily Parker. He copied the video files, checked the metadata, and began a digital log. Chain of custody mattered. If this ever reached family court, every step had to be clean. He photographed each frame, added timestamps, and attached written notes. As dawn touched the edges of Boston, Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhausted but steady. He wasn't just a millionaire developer anymore. He was a man with a mission. The next evening, Daniel returned to Roxbury. Mrs. O'Connor was waiting near her door, as though she had expected him. "I saw her again," she whispered, eyes brimming. "Dragging bags, scrubbing floors, empty fridge when I peeked in. That man treats her like a servant, not a child." Daniel nodded. "I have the footage. I'm building the record." Mrs. O'Connor's hand trembled as she touched his arm. "Then don't stop. She needs you. You're the first one I've seen come back." From inside 3B came a crash, the sound of glass breaking, followed by Carl's roar. Daniel's fists clenched. He wanted to kick the door down, but the law was watching, and Carl would use any misstep to twist the narrative. He stepped back, swallowing the fury, but in his mind, the decision was carved deeper. He would not abandon Lily. That night, Daniel drove to the Boston Police Department's headquarters on Tremont Street. He parked, hands tight on the steering wheel. He knew enough about custody battles to understand the odds. Carl was legally her guardian. Without clear evidence of abuse or neglect, the system often sided with blood ties. But Daniel had something most never did: the will to fight, the resources to endure, and now, the beginnings of proof. He closed his eyes, picturing Lily's whisper again. "I just want to buy milk." It was no longer just a whisper, it was a vow. The storm didn't break with thunder. It began with a single photograph. Daniel was in his back bay office reviewing the digital log of Lily's hallway footage when his assistant rushed in with a pale face and a phone clutched in hand. "Sir, you need to see this." On the screen glowed an image already gathering thousands of comments. It showed Daniel Hayes, millionaire real estate developer, holding a frail little girl in his arms on Tremont Street. The caption blared across the post like a wound: "Mystery millionaire and missing girl." Daniel's chest tightened. He recognized the moment instantly. The day he had given Lily money for milk, when she had stumbled against him and he had steadied her by the shoulders. Somehow a bystander had snapped it, stripped away its truth, and now turned it into a weapon. Within hours, the image bled across forums, gossip blogs, even Twitter threads. Rich creep caught with child. Another Epstein? Where's DCF in this mess? Daniel closed his laptop, jaw tight. He had spent years building an empire on reputation, his name printed on half the towers rising along Boston's skyline. But in an age where perception trumped fact, all it took was one poisoned seed to rot the orchard. By nightfall, local news picked up the story. Channel 5's anchor delivered it with practiced concern. Tonight, questions surround Boston developer Daniel Hayes after he was photographed in what some call a suspicious encounter with a minor girl. Authorities have not yet commented. Daniel turned off the television. Silence pressed in, broken only by the pounding of his heart. His phone rang. "Daniel!" The voice was crisp, professional, and edged with urgency. Angela Morris, attorney from New York, renowned in family law. He had reached out to her weeks before on a separate business matter. Now, fate had delivered her expertise at exactly the hour he needed it most. "You've seen the headlines?" she asked. "Yes." His voice was low, clipped. "They're twisting it. They're making me the villain." Angela didn't waste words. "That's precisely what Carl Dawson wants. It's classic public opinion manipulation. Smear first, discredit the rescuer, then claim sole guardianship. Once the public labels you, the courts will hesitate to side with you, regardless of evidence." Daniel's throat tightened. "So what do I do?" "You fight smart," Angela replied. Step 1. We build a counter-narrative grounded in fact. Step 2. Document every interaction with Lily under supervision. Step 3. Prepare for the custody battle Carl has already set in motion. I'll fly up tomorrow. The next morning, Daniel's company, Hayes Development, received its first tremor. Clients called in, anxious. An upcoming contract with a financial firm in Cambridge was put on hold, pending clarification of the news. His communications director entered his office with worry in her eyes. "We can't ignore this, Daniel. It's viral. Shareholders are already calling for reassurance." Daniel's gaze fell to the photo printed in the morning paper on his desk. Lily's face was blurred, but the implication remained sharp as a blade. "I won't deny the truth," he said finally, "but I won't exploit her either." That afternoon, Angela arrived from New York, her navy suit immaculate, her case file thick with statutes and precedents. She set her briefcase on his conference table and looked him directly in the eye. "Understand this. she said, her tone both sharp and steady. Family courts in Massachusetts lean heavily toward biological guardians unless there's irrefutable proof of neglect or abuse. Carl Dawson is leveraging public narrative to paint you as a predator. If that sticks, Lily will be forced back into his custody. Daniel's fists curled. That man is a drunk. I have footage. I have proof. Angela raised a hand. Footage helps, but media storms move faster than courts. Right now, perception is the battlefield. She opened her laptop, revealing a timeline of posts, blogs, and anonymous accounts all pushing the same narrative at the same time. This is coordinated, she said. Not just gossip, it's a smear campaign. Likely fueled by Carl, maybe with help from others who'd love to see a millionaire crash. But remember, Daniel, we can't simply play defense. We need to show the public the truth without harming Lily further. That night, Daniel scrolled through comments again. Each one was a knife. Monster, creep, child stealer. But one voice cut through the noise. On a small neighborhood forum, Mrs. O'Connor had written, "That child is no mystery. Her name is Lily Parker, and she's been raising herself while her stepfather drinks away their lives. Mr. Hayes is the first man I've seen stop, the first who cared enough to come back. If you call him a predator, then you've never seen true cruelty in these halls." Her words gathered quiet traction. A few neighbors added their own affirmations. The tide had not turned, but a crack had opened. Daniel read them twice, then closed his eyes. For years he had lived in boardrooms where numbers decided value, where worth was measured in contracts and returns. But now, his future, and Lily's, balanced on words typed by strangers, carried by the invisible winds of the internet. Angela's voice echoed in his ear from their strategy session earlier. "Buckle in, Daniel. The smear is only the beginning. The real war is about to start." The text came just after midnight. Daniel was still awake, sitting at his mahogany desk overlooking the Charles River, the city glittering like broken glass beneath the winter sky. His phone buzzed, the screen glowing with an unknown number. The message was short, chilling. "Want to know where the girl is? Bring cash. No cops." Daniel's stomach clenched. He had expected retaliation, but the bluntness rattled him. He forwarded the text to Angela immediately. Within minutes, her name flashed on his screen. "Daniel, listen carefully," she said, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Do not respond. Do not bring money. This is bait. If you play their game, you'll be the one accused of trafficking. We're taking this straight to DCF and the police." DCF. Massachusetts Department of Children and Families. 3 decades ago, Daniel had known them only from whispered rumors in his neighborhood. Kids taken from homes, some saved, some lost in the shuffle. Now, they were his only hope. Angela moved quickly. By dawn, she had filed an emergency care and protection petition in Suffolk County, supported by the video evidence Daniel had collected and the threatening text message. The request: immediate removal of Lily Parker from the custody of Carl Dawson. That afternoon, a DCF investigator, Detective Harris from Boston PD, and Angela met Daniel outside the Roxbury building. Harris, a woman with steady eyes and a notepad always at the ready, spoke firmly. "We'll enter with caution. If Lily is in imminent danger, we have authority under Massachusetts law to issue an emergency removal order. But I'll need to hear from the child herself." Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He wanted to break the door down himself, but the law had its choreography. The knock on 3B echoed like a gunshot. Carl opened it, bleary-eyed, whiskey still on his breath. When Harris introduced herself and mentioned DCF, his face contorted. "You people again?" he snarled. "That kid's mine. You've got no right barging in here." Angela's tone was steel. Mr. Dawson, your guardianship does not extend to exploitation. The state has full authority to ensure Lily's welfare. Behind Carl, Lily peeked from the kitchen doorway. Her eyes lit when they found Daniel, then dimmed when Carl noticed. "Come here," Harris said gently, kneeling to Lily's height. "Sweetheart, I need to ask you something very important. Where do you feel safe? Who do you want to be with?" The room went silent. Even Carl froze, calculating. Lily's lips trembled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I want to go with Mr. Daniel," she whispered. Then louder, voice breaking. "Please, don't make me stay." Her sobs split the air. That was enough. Harris straightened, her voice clear. "On the authority of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 119, Section 51B, this child is hereby removed from your custody under an emergency removal order." Carl exploded, shouting curses, pounding his fists on the wall. Two officers stepped forward, blocking him. Daniel bent to Lily's level, arms open. She ran to him, clutching his coat, burying her face against his chest. Her small frame shook with relief and fear all at once. He held her steady, his own throat burning. "You're safe now, Lily. I promise you're safe." At DCF headquarters later that evening, paperwork spread across the conference table. Harris explained the terms. Temporary foster placement was standard, but given Daniel's stability, wealth, and immediate availability, the court could approve him as her temporary guardian pending a formal hearing. Angela pressed the advantage. "Mr. Hayes is uniquely positioned to provide not just shelter, but continuity of care. The child herself requested to stay with him. Under Massachusetts law, the voice of the child carries weight." The caseworker nodded, scribbling notes. "We'll draft the interim order. The family court judge will want confirmation within 72 hours. Daniel exhaled slowly. 3 days. It felt both too long and impossibly short. But tonight, for the first time, Lily would not fall asleep behind a locked door and the stench of beer. Tonight, she would have light, warmth, and food. Driving back to his apartment, Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror. Lily sat curled in the back seat, clutching the half-empty carton of milk she'd carried like a talisman through the chaos. Her eyelids fluttered, exhaustion dragging her down, but when she caught his eyes in the mirror, she whispered, "Thank you." Daniel swallowed hard. "You don't need to thank me, Lily. You just need to rest." She leaned her head against the seat, eyes closing, the milk still in her arms. For the first time in decades, Daniel felt his own heart soften, a warmth cracking through the walls he had built since childhood. The boardrooms, the contracts, the endless skyline, all of it seemed hollow compared to the fragile trust of one little girl who had just chosen him over blood. The city never slept, but Daniel's Upper West Side apartment had always been an island of silence. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the Hudson, Italian leather couches untouched, marble countertops gleaming under recessed light. A showpiece for investors, not a home. Now, as he unlocked the door with Lily standing timidly at his side, the silence felt different. It wasn't elegant anymore. It was cavernous, echoing with absence. Lily clutched the carton of milk she had carried from Boston as though it were a shield. She hovered near the threshold, eyes darting around the high-ceilinged living room. The chandeliers, the art pieces on the wall, the gleam of polished wood, they didn't comfort her. They intimidated her. Daniel crouched down, voice softer than it had been in years. "This is our stop for now, Lily. You're safe here." She nodded but didn't cross farther inside. Only after Daniel gently placed a glass of warm milk on the counter did she take a few cautious steps. That night, Daniel tried to sleep in his master bedroom, but the quiet pressed on him. At 2 a.m., he rose, restless, and walked to the guest room where Lily lay. The door was cracked open. Inside, she thrashed against the sheets, whispering in broken fragments. "Don't spill it. I'll clean it. Please don't be mad." Daniel's chest tightened. He knelt by her bed. "Lily," he whispered gently, "you're safe. It's just a dream." Her eyes shot open, wide and glassy. She gasped, clutching his sleeve as if falling into water. Tears streaked down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'll do better, I promise, He wrapped his arms around her small frame, steady and firm. "No, Lily, you don't have to promise anything. You're not in that apartment anymore. You don't have to clean or beg or be afraid. You're safe." Her breathing slowed only after minutes, her small fingers still gripping his shirt as though letting go would drop her back into the nightmare. Daniel stayed until she finally drifted into sleep again. He sat there in the dark, heart aching. He had built towers across the skyline, yet he had never felt the weight of true responsibility like this, holding the trust of a child who had known nothing but fear. The following morning, Angela arranged for Lily's first medical evaluation at NYU Langone Children's Hospital. The pediatric specialist, Dr. Carter, examined her with a gentleness that made Daniel grateful. "Malnourished," Dr. Carter said, noting Lily's weight on the chart. "Vitamin deficiencies, evidence of chronic neglect. We'll run labs for anemia. There are also signs of acute stress disorder, night terrors, hypervigilance, classic PTSD presentation in children." The words landed like hammers. Daniel had heard legal terms, financial terms, structural terms his whole life. But these, malnourished PTSD, cut deeper than any quarterly report. "Is it permanent?" he asked quietly. Dr. Carter shook her head. "Not if she receives consistent care, nutrition, and a stable environment. Children are remarkably resilient, but she'll need therapy, structure, and patience. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon." Daniel looked through the glass window at Lily in the waiting area. She sat with a coloring book, tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth as she carefully filled in the lines of a cartoon sun. She had chosen yellow and orange, pressing the crayons hard, almost as if she wanted to make the sun burn brighter than the page could hold. He whispered to himself, "I'll give her that sun, whatever it takes." Back at the apartment that evening, Daniel prepared dinner himself for the first time in years. Pasta boiled, sauce simmered. Lily watched cautiously from the stool, as though waiting for him to reveal it was all a trick. When he placed a steaming bowl before her, she hesitated, then took a tentative bite. Her eyes widened. "This tastes good." Daniel smiled, awkward but genuine. "Better than—" She giggled softly, the sound fragile but real. "Better than moldy bread at the old place." The innocence of her words struck him harder than any insult Carl Dawson had ever hurled. Moldy bread should never have been her reference point, yet she said it with such acceptance, as if it were normal. Daniel reached across the table, steady. "From now on, you'll always have food, Lily. Not scraps, real food, every day." She nodded slowly, as though trying to believe him. That night, before bed, Lily drew again. She sketched a carton of milk with a smiley face, standing taller than a stick figure girl. When Daniel asked what it meant, she shrugged shyly. "It means, here, the milk doesn't run out." Daniel's throat tightened. He pinned the drawing to the refrigerator with a silver magnet. It was the first real decoration in his sterile apartment, and in that moment, the penthouse finally felt less like a museum and more like a home. The glass walls of the Manhattan Family Court Visitation Center gleamed under fluorescent light. For most, the space was sterile, almost clinical. Gray carpet, metal chairs, a shelf of battered toys, and cameras fixed high in the corners. But for Daniel, it felt like a battlefield, one where truth and deception would collide. Angela Morris stood beside him, briefcase in hand, her sharp gaze sweeping the room. "Remember," she said, lowering her voice. "Supervised visitation means every second is monitored, recorded, and logged. Don't interfere unless Lily is in danger. Let the system witness what we already know." Daniel nodded, though his pulse hammered. Across the room, a security officer adjusted the digital recorder. At the far end sat Carl Dawson, scrubbed up in an ill-fitting blazer, hair combed, stubble shaved. He looked almost respectable, if one ignored the twitch in his jaw and the faint odor of alcohol beneath his cologne. Then the door opened. Lily entered, clutching a stuffed bunny Daniel had bought her the night before. Her small hand tightened around his sleeve, reluctant to cross the threshold. "It's all right," Daniel whispered, kneeling to meet her eyes. "I'll be right here. You're not alone." She nodded, but her steps toward Carl were slow, hesitant, like a deer approaching a trap. "Lily!" Carl spread his arms theatrically. His voice boomed with false warmth. "Sweetheart, come give your daddy a hug." The word daddy hung heavy in the air. Lily froze halfway. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Angela's pen scratched notes on her legal pad. The court-appointed supervisor, Ms. Lopez, observed silently, tablet in hand, documenting every gesture. Carl's smile faltered. "What, you don't miss me?" "I've been worried sick. These people—" He gestured sharply toward Daniel. "They're trying to take you away from your family." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, remembering Angela's warning. Lily hugged the bunny tighter. Her voice trembled. "You yelled at me. You made me get beer. I don't want to go back." The words cut the room in half. Carl's face darkened, the mask slipping. Now, that's not true. You're confused, Pumpkin. They're putting lies in your head. You know I love you." His tone sharpened, the pretense cracking. "You better remember who feeds you, girl." Angela tapped her phone discreetly, signaling the recording was live. Lily began to cry, soft at first, then harder. "I don't want to live there. I want to stay with Mr. Daniel." Her voice shook the sterile walls. Daniel's chest burned with the urge to cross the room, to shield her, but Angela placed a steady hand on his arm. "Let it stand," she whispered. "Every word is being logged." Carl leaned forward, voice low but venomous. "Ungrateful brat. After all I've done." "Mr. Dawson." The supervisor's voice sliced in, calm but firm. "Visitation is terminated for today. Your behavior is in violation of court protocol." Security stepped forward. Carl cursed under his breath, slamming a fist against the table before being escorted out. The door closed. Silence returned. Daniel crossed the room, kneeling before Lily. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing against his chest. "I told the truth," she whispered through tears. "I told them." He stroked her hair, steady. "You were brave, Lily. Braver than anyone could ask." Angela approached, her face softened but triumphant. "That statement will be in the supervised visitation report. Combined with the footage, it's damning. Judges don't ignore a child's explicit wish, especially when corroborated by behavior like his." Daniel held Lily closer. For the first time in weeks, hope didn't feel like a fragile thread. It felt solid, like stone. That evening, back in his Manhattan apartment, Daniel placed Lily's bunny on the bed as she curled under the blankets. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her breathing was calmer. "Do I have to see him again?" she whispered. Daniel hesitated. He wanted to promise no, but the law moved slowly. Maybe once more, he admitted gently. But the judge knows what you said today. They're listening to you, Lily. Your voice matters. She blinked, as though trying to believe it. Then she whispered, "Thank you for staying." He kissed the top of her head. Always. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its endless noise, horns, sirens, footsteps. But inside that apartment, the sound that mattered most was Lily's soft, steady breath as she drifted into sleep. Her nightmares eased, if only for tonight. The Monday morning sun climbed over Manhattan like a reluctant witness. Daniel sat at the head of the long conference table in Hayes Development's glass tower, overlooking Central Park. Yet the room was not filled with blueprints and investors as it once was. Now it pulsed with the frantic energy of crisis management. Angela Morris sat on his left, notes spread before her. Across the table, the communications director, Julia Kane, adjusted her glasses and spoke urgently. The smear campaign hasn't slowed. Blogs, Twitter threads, tabloid articles, they're all spinning the same narrative. Rich developer exploiting a poor child. If we stay silent, the perception hardens. Your contracts, your credibility, everything you've built is on the line. Daniel leaned back, weary but unyielding. And if we answer carelessly, we expose Lily to more scrutiny. I won't let her become a circus attraction. Angela nodded. Exactly. The strategy isn't to sensationalize, but to humanize. The truth is on our side, Daniel. You just need to claim it. That afternoon, Daniel walked into the press room on the 15th floor of his building. Rows of journalists sat ready, cameras flashing. It was the first time he had addressed the public since the storm began. He adjusted the microphone, the weight of silence pressing on him. Then he spoke, voice steady. I know what's been said about me. That I'm a predator. That I've taken advantage of a child. Those lies cut deep, not because of what they say about me, but because of what they do to her. Her name is Lily Parker. She's 6 years old. She has lived through things no child should ever endure. Hunger, neglect, fear. And yet when I met her, all she asked for was milk. The room shifted. Pens paused. Cameras leaned closer. I will not exploit her pain, but I will tell you this. Protecting children is never wrong. No smear, no rumor, no campaign of lies will ever make me regret stepping in, because silence, in the face of suffering, is the only crime I refuse to commit. For a moment, there was only stillness. Then questions erupted, voices colliding. Daniel held up his hand. That's all for now. The rest will be shown in court, where truth belongs. The statement hit social media within minutes. At first, the hashtags remained cruel. #CreepMillionaire, #Predator in a suit. But soon another hashtag appeared, #ProtectLily. It started small, with a post from Mrs. O'Connor. She uploaded a grainy video from her phone, recorded months earlier, Lily dragging trash bags down the hall while Carl shouted in the background. Her caption was simple. This is what Daniel Hayes is trying to stop. Believe the truth. The post spread like wildfire. By evening, shopkeepers in Roxbury, neighbors from the building, even Lily's elementary school teacher added their voices. They described her hunger, her tattered clothes, her quiet resilience. One grocer wrote, "She'd come in with coins, buying bread past its date. She always smiled, even when I knew she was starving." The narrative began to bend. Major outlets picked up the counterstory. Boston Herald ran the headline, "Is Hayes the villain or the only one who cared?" Meanwhile, Carl lashed back. On a live radio show, his voice slurred as he insisted, "That millionaire's obsessed with my girl. He wants to steal her 'cause he's lonely in his glass castle. But the audio betrayed him. Listeners caught the bitterness, the contradictions. Clips circulated online, captioned, "Does this sound like a loving father?" Angela leaned over Daniel's shoulder that night, scrolling through the surge of support. "This is turning, Daniel. You gave the public something solid to believe in. And once a child's face is tied to resilience, not scandal, the smear collapses." Daniel exhaled slowly, watching the trending feed. Thousands of comments, photos of milk cartons with the words, "For Lily," scribbled on them. Strangers were leaving cartons outside DCF offices, schools, even Hayes Development Headquarters, a quiet show of solidarity. For the first time, he felt the tide shift, not just for him, but for her. Later that night, Daniel returned to the apartment. Lily sat at the kitchen counter sketching another drawing. This one showed two stick figures, a tall man holding the hand of a little girl. Above them, in uneven letters, she had written, "Not alone anymore." He knelt beside her. "Is that us?" She nodded shyly. "The people on TV said bad things. But I know the truth." Daniel's throat tightened. "And the world is starting to see it too." He pinned the new drawing beside the first one, the smiling milk carton. Slowly, his refrigerator was becoming a gallery of survival, of hope. Angela's words echoed in his mind. "The real war is fought not just in courtrooms but in hearts. And right now, you're winning both." The courthouse on Pemberton Square loomed with solemn weight, its granite facade worn by more than a century of judgments. On that gray morning, Boston seemed to hold its breath. Inside, the Suffolk County Family Court buzzed with urgency. Reporters lingered on the steps, whispering about the case that had already spilled from tabloids into national headlines, the millionaire and the little girl who asked only for milk. Daniel sat at the petitioner's table, his suit pressed, but his hands tight against one another. Beside him, Angela Morris arranged files into crisp stacks, medical reports, security footage, supervised visitation transcripts. Across the aisle, Carl Dawson slouched with forced bravado, his new lawyer whispering in his ear. The clerk's voice cut through the murmurs. "All rise. Family Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Margaret Whitfield presiding." The room stood. Judge Whitfield, a woman in her late 60s with silver hair and sharp glasses, settled onto the bench. She scanned the file before her, then raised her eyes. "This is an emergency custody hearing regarding the minor child, Lily Parker. Mr. Dawson, as stepfather and legal guardian by marriage, contests the removal order. Mr. Hayes petitions for continued custody. Counsel proceed." Carl's attorney rose first. He painted Daniel as a man with unhealthy fixation, suggesting that wealth and loneliness had driven him to invent a rescue narrative. He gestured dramatically at Carl, who managed a performance of grief, dabbing his eyes with a crumpled handkerchief. "My client loves his daughter," the attorney declared. "She has been manipulated by outside influence, promised luxury in exchange for affection. He fears she is being alienated from her rightful family." Daniel's jaw locked, but Angela squeezed his arm. "Wait." When it was her turn, Angela stood with calm precision. "Your Honor, words are easy. Evidence is harder, and in this case, evidence is overwhelming." She submitted exhibits one by one, the security footage showing Lily dragging trash bags and buying alcohol for Carl, the medical reports from NYU Langone, malnutrition, anemia, PTSD, the supervised visitation transcript where Lily explicitly said, "I don't want to go back. I want to stay with Mr. Daniel." Angela's voice sharpened. "This is not a child being lured by wealth. This is a child begging for safety. The law is clear. The child's best interest must guide this court, and Lily has told us herself where that interest lies. The judge leaned forward. Bring the child in. A bailiff opened the side door. Lily entered, her small hand clutching her stuffed bunny. She walked slowly, but when she spotted Daniel, her eyes steadied. Judge Whitfield's tone softened. Hello, Lily. You're very brave for being here. I just need to ask you one question. Where do you feel safe? Where do you want to live? The room hushed. Lily's voice was quiet, but it carried. With Mr. Daniel, I'm scared to go back. Please don't make me. A tremor swept through the courtroom. Even the court stenographer paused for a breath. Carl surged to his feet, face red. She's lying. They put that in her head. His shout echoed against the walls. Mr. Dawson! Judge Whitfield's gavel struck hard. One more outburst and you will be held in contempt. Carl's lawyer tugged him down, but the damage was done. Angela closed with steady finality. Your Honor, the law cannot return this child to fear. It cannot ignore her words, her medical condition, or her courage. We ask the court to affirm Mr. Hayes as her temporary guardian and restrict Mr. Dawson's contact pending further review. The judge adjusted her glasses, silent for a long moment. The room seemed to balance on her next breath. Finally, she spoke. The court finds sufficient evidence of neglect and emotional harm. The emergency removal order is upheld. Custody of the minor, Lily Parker, is granted to Mr. Hayes for 90 days pending a full review. Mr. Dawson's visitation is suspended, save for supervised contact approved by DCF. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. Daniel exhaled for the first time that day. His vision blurred, not from fear this time, but from relief. Lily ran into his arms, clutching him tightly. Her bunny squished between them. We get to stay? She whispered. Yes, he said, voice breaking. You get to stay. Angela packed her files, a rare smile tugging at her lips. That was only round one. But make no mistake, Daniel. You just won the ground that matters most. As they left the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. Daniel shielded Lily, his coat enveloping her small frame. The world could clamor, speculate, distort. But today, in the quiet authority of a courtroom, truth had spoken clearly. And for the first time, Daniel felt the possibility of something more than survival. He felt the beginning of a family. 3 months passed, like the slow turning of seasons. Boston's harsh winter melted into spring, then gave way to the lush greens of early summer. For Daniel, the days had been filled with hearings, paperwork, therapy sessions, and the delicate rhythm of learning to be something he had never been before. A guardian, a father figure, a safe place. On a quiet Friday morning, Judge Whitfield's ruling arrived in a sealed envelope. Daniel opened it with trembling hands. The words blurred for a moment before his eyes steadied. Full legal custody of the minor child, Lily Parker, is granted to petitioner, Mr. Daniel Hayes. He sat back in his chair, exhaling the breath he had been holding for months. The paper shook in his hands, but his heart was steady. It was done. Weeks later, Daniel and Lily drove north along I-89, leaving the glass towers of Manhattan behind. The air grew fresher as the road wound past the forests of Vermont, sunlight dappling through green leaves. Lily sat in the back seat, a sketchbook on her lap, drawing the mountains with crayons. "Are we almost there?" she asked, her voice laced with excitement rather than fear. "Almost," Daniel said with a smile. "You'll see the lake soon." Their destination, a cabin he had bought on the shores of Lake Champlain just outside Burlington. It wasn't one of his polished investments or gleaming towers. It was wood and stone, simple and warm, with a porch that looked out across the water. When they arrived, Lily jumped out of the car, barefoot on the soft grass, spinning in circles. The lake shimmered in the late afternoon sun, sailboats drifting like toys on its vast surface. "This is ours?" she asked, eyes wide. "Ours," Daniel confirmed. She ran to the porch, dropped her backpack, and spread her arms wide as if to embrace the house itself. "It feels happy," she whispered. Daniel watched her, his chest tight with something new, something bigger than relief, more enduring than victory. It was peace. The days in Vermont unfolded gently. Daniel woke early, making pancakes with Lily perched on the counter, stirring batter with messy enthusiasm. They planted herbs in the small garden, took walks by the lake, and watched fireflies glow like tiny lanterns against the night. For Lily, healing came slowly, but visibly. The night terrors eased. The shadows under her eyes lightened. She laughed more often, sometimes so hard she dropped her fork at dinner. One evening, Daniel returned from the market to find her asleep on the porch swing, a half-finished glass of milk beside her, her sketchbook open. On the page was a crayon drawing, a wooden cabin with yellow windows glowing, a little girl smiling at the doorway, and beside her a tall man holding her hand. At the top she had written in crooked letters, "Home." Daniel knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. He whispered, "Yes, Lily, home." On the first official day of summer, neighbors gathered by the lake for a bonfire. Lily played with other children, chasing fireflies, her laughter echoing over the water. Mrs. O'Connor, who had accepted Daniel's invitation to visit from Boston, sat in a rocking chair nearby, her shawl wrapped tight. "She's different," she said softly, watching Lily run barefoot in the grass. "The shadows are lifting." Daniel nodded. "She's stronger than anyone knows." Mrs. O'Connor glanced at him, eyes kind. "And so are you. You broke the circle, Daniel. You gave her what no one gave you." Her words sank deep. He thought of his own childhood, of doors slammed, of milk lines, of silence. And then he looked at Lily, glowing in the firelight, free. This was the legacy he had chosen. Not skyscrapers, not contracts. A child's laughter on a summer night. Later, as the fire burned low, Lily tugged Daniel's hand. "Can we go home now?" He smiled. "Yes, let's go home." Back at the cabin, Lily climbed into bed, hugging her stuffed bunny. She looked up at him sleepily. "Promise me something?" "Anything. Promise there'll always be milk in the fridge, and lights on when I wake up from bad dreams." Daniel's throat tightened. He brushed her hair back and whispered, "I promise. You'll always have milk, and you'll never wake up in the dark again." She smiled, eyes fluttering closed. Daniel stood for a long time by her bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her breath. Then he stepped onto the porch. The lake stretched out before him, moonlight dancing on its surface. Behind him the cabin glowed with warm light, a beacon against the night. For the first time in his life, Daniel Hayes wasn't defined by the towers he had built, or the fortune he had amassed. He was defined by a promise kept, by a home where a little girl could finally rest without fear. The house smelled faintly of pancakes, crayons, and warm milk, and that was enough. Thank you for staying with us until the very last chapter of Daniel and Lily's journey. May their story remind us that compassion can break cycles of pain, and love can build homes stronger than any walls of stone or glass. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who needs hope today. Together, let's keep spreading light, one story at a time.